Boom! Ladies and gentlemen, we are back in the studio. It is late November. I was going to say December, but it's not true. And here's the question. There's only one question that I need to start this podcast with. Did Epstein kill himself?
Yes. No, I'm joking. Okay. Of course he did not kill himself. I think everybody knows that he did not kill himself. That's a good topic to start the podcast with. Okay.
I think it's meme-worthy. So ladies and gentlemen, I am here with my brother, Jordan, who has been on the road for some time now. He has, he's come back here and there on a regular basis when it comes to revisiting Montreal every year. You tend to come back around Christmas and all the different things that are going with that. But this year is actually pretty special because I believe, I don't want to say he's come back for good, but he's come back for some time. And he's going to be here for some time. We're going to be working together. This is the second time that we work together. But the first time we're working together on things that are related to me.
Yeah. So originally we started working together, I think it was last year when I was kind of traveling, and you had me running on this whole, starting a travel brand, start your own brand. You can get paid to travel.
So it's even the third time we actually worked together then.
Yeah. So, we kind of worked on creating this whole brand for me that he was trying to empower me to create, you could travel and get paid, and you could make more money than what I have been doing in the past. And it didn't end up working out. I didn't really have the whole motivation to work from a computer, especially while, trying to plan to jump around from hostels and going to all these beautiful places and destinations and trying to get good Wi-Fi and staying productive at the same time proved to be quite a big issue, I guess, for me. And then so I kind of backed out saying don't even pay me. I screwed up. I can't do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the goal, just for more clarity, basically I had bought 3 Instagram pages as kind of research for what I do, and one of the things that I do, which is growth hacking, storytelling online, learning how to kind of gain traction on social media. And so I bought these 3 Instagram pages, and they were all travel based, or one of them was luxury based and the other 2 were travel based. And I was like, oh, why don't you just take these over, turn one of them into a luxury travel, and then keep the other ones running, but put them all under one brand. And I believe that still would have crushed. I believe it still can. I think those accounts are significantly more dormant now, and that's a big problem for sure, because algorithmically, they might be fully dead.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they could be revived, possibly.
But I think that maybe there's a part of the algorithm that's also built in where it's hey, this account hasn't posted in a year, and they just kind of throw it out there somehow, maybe to the followers, and say hey, by the way, these guys are still around. Back when they were posting, you were sending them likes, and now it's been a year since they posted, so they haven't earned your likes, but they haven't lost maybe there.
I think that's hopeful thinking. I think, look, I'm not trying to say you're not going to have any algorithm juice, but it's definitely worse than having consistently posted without a doubt.
Exactly, and it's not really the focus of the moment, right? It's
totally.
Still
And the point is that we look to work together. And so obviously Jordan and I, let me back up here. Jordan and I have worked together on things like a garden center, where I hired him to do a bunch of uploading work and essentially what was bitch work, but was still well paid for what you were doing, 100%, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You were still very well paid for what you were actually doing. And it was very, it was a relaxed job, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it sucked. It sucked because you just had to kind of be there for a while, and it was just kind of monotonous. It felt very machine-like. It was kind of transferring information from one database into another database and essentially moving information there. And then, yes, I've been looking to empower my brother to do something more than teaching English for a living, because I think that is just not living up to the potential of who he is as a character, not living up to the earnings potential that he has from a career perspective. And I don't know. I see you being more passionate and more interesting than your ability to be a teacher, and that kind of teacher specifically.
Yeah, I think that I've always seen myself as a teacher and as a teacher type. Especially one of my favorite things, to tell people once I started in the profession, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do? And what have you always wanted to do?" And well, my dream was always to just I'm going to go to university, I'm going to get this degree, and I'm just going to be a professor because they have the best life ever. And it just seems fun. You kind of, you switch roles, right? You're no longer the person who's writing the essays. You're kind of just giving the essays. Of course, that means that you have 20 or 100 essays coming in at the same time. but it just seemed like a better role, and it seemed like I had more power and say into like what gets educated, because like one of my favorite things in university was correcting my teachers. It's like actually, like, I studied that, and like I know that you're incorrect, and like I called a teacher out once in front of 400 person auditorium, and that was kind of my moment. Because she ended up talking to me during a break, and she apologized to the class after the break because I proved her wrong, and like she had to apologize to 400 people in front of me. And so like I don't think that was necessarily a power trip. It was kind of just like, look, like if you're gonna teach something, like you are the epitome of like our education. You need to get it right, and you need to take it seriously, and that's what I've done as a language teacher teaching abroad.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you didn't take what you're doing seriously. I just think that getting paid what's roughly the equivalent of a few $1,000s American, let's say, I'll speak in American dollars or Canadian dollars, a month is great when you're traveling and you're young, but when you're like, when you hit your 30s, which you're about to hit this in 2020, I guess, when you kind of go into those time frames, I just personally see so much more capacity for earnings, and I think that mom and dad on our end have done a ton to generate a shit ton of opportunity for us going forward, and I see a real capacity for you to hone in your skill and then add fuel to the fire, given like who I am, given the infrastructure I have, but also given the infrastructure that mom and dad bring to you, given the infrastructure you already have within your own network, and given the infrastructure of like, if you are a passionate teacher, then you're also a passionate student. And I think the idea of us working together, which now Jordan is fully taking on the production, release, and distribution of the podcast, so that's why he's in the captain's chair at the moment.
Yeah, all within the whole entire week that I have to prepare for all the tasks that are getting thrown at me. But I'm doing what I can at my own pace, and also trying to like internalize everything. But
yeah, and I mean, you're doing what I think seems like a pretty good job getting up and running and getting things going. I started with him understanding the equipment, and he helped me set it up a little bit. No, this was already here, but we kind of recalibrated things. We retaped things to the bottom of this table. There's all kinds of wires and things that you don't see in this production, but they are there. There are multiple cameras and multiple scenarios. There's actually a camera set up there, but we're not using it for this particular podcast. But we would if we were playing Settlers of Catan, which yesterday we went 1-1. He won one, I won one, and his friend, or our friend, just it was his first time playing, so I'll give him that. What a dirty, that first one was so so dirty. That's all I gotta say.
As some of you may know, Mark is not
I'm a sore loser. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, and I'm a sore loser because I'm a strategic player. Meaning, I'm a sore loser only because I really play to win. Not because I want to be better than the other person, but because for me, it's what I expect of me. It actually has much less to do with so like a lot of people think like, oh, you want to win because you want to be better than me. It's like, no, I want to win because I want to prove that I have the capacity to do such.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the other person in front of the table. I think I'll beat whoever it is, and I don't care about that.
Yeah, and I think that like we have similarities in that too. Like I think I'm a very strategic thinker. I think I'm a little bit less outspoken about it when faced with this table and you and other people. I think they see you being like trying to control it more, and with a little bit more like aggression, maybe not like actual like anger, but you're trying to show this objective, like I'm out here and I'm trying to win, and like Jordan's the one who's in the lead right now. Focus on Jordan, and I always kind of show this like passive, like I don't know, like is that really who's winning? So I kind of go with this, and it's
softer. He plays the softer. He plays the more. It's almost like the useful idiot, right? It's like you're playing the idiot so that people don't. Your technique is run under the radar. But I know for a fact that these games are much closer. Like I know that the difference between winning and losing, the strategy changes the game 1 or 2%. Yeah. Meaning it's like it's a 51-49, like everything in life, in my opinion. But it's a 51-49 between who might actually win and who might actually lose. And the person who's in the lead There's always, there's always the forces that start ganging up because that's the way that, the underdog kind of mentality fights against the bigger power.
Yeah.
And there's always a few turns or rolls that could make that happen. Anyway, all this to say, Jordan is a strategic thinker. And so I'm catching him up to the strategy of running a podcast. And not just running a podcast, but running a video podcast. A video podcast can go live. Today we're not live for this one because I have another one coming later today. So that will go live. But the point is that essentially he's learning the ins and outs of what it takes to tell stories on social media, and that's super embodied. Like there's a lot of information, and I'm throwing a lot of information his way, and I'm focusing on him learning it within a very short time span because number one, I'm going to Madagascar in a few days, so he's going to be left with 2 full podcasts to essentially produce from start to finish. I don't expect him to do it all perfectly, but what I expect him to do is get through most of it. And then when I come back, there will have already been 2 other episodes that have gone out anyway. So I will have the time to adjust any mistakes he's made and move through all the different pieces from there. And that's what I expect.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is because you've seen that I am a storyteller, right? I started my own podcast thanks to, what Marc has kind of told me, because I was saying, hey, I've always had this thing. And in all honesty, if I have to answer the question why I'm starting this podcast, it has to go with digging deep into my biggest fear. And I've told this to people. It's from the minute that I started traveling, I started this story saying oh, I want to travel, see the world, blah, blah, blah. And then at the exact same time, I realized what my biggest fear is. It's what if I forget all of these stories? What if I just lose my memory? And so then I came to the conclusion that okay, at the end of this, whenever the end of this is, I need to just write the best stories down. And I came up with the idea that I'm going to make a book. I'm going to categorize it just alphabetical order, all the countries. It's going to be this big banger, and nobody's going to buy it. But at least I'll be able to read my own stories if for some reason I get something like dementia or Alzheimer's. And I said that
nobody gives a fuck about your book, including you. Which is true, because I believe that it's much better for him to bring the people who he's traveled with on a podcast and tell those stories. And for those who can't be here, number one, he can zoom them in. That's one thing. Number two, he could just tell the story on his own without the other person's input, and that's a significantly richer, more emotional way of communicating a story. And that's why we're doing a video podcast. I wouldn't want to just run an audio podcast because I do believe it's valuable. I listen to audio of YouTube all the time, but I still here and there look at the video. And I still prefer the video. I still listen to podcasts through video platforms. And that's because I'm a YouTube freak. But I believe that this is where the world is going, more so, and that this is part of an overall strategy that is necessary to carry out. My problem is I'm involved in so much shit, and so many people want me to do everything all the time, that even today I was talking about a farm, and we're going to put financing in this, we're going to do this, we're going to move it this way, we're going to structure this thing. I was working on the marketing for an electric bike and electric bike shop here in Montreal. I was working on a bunch of different things. I was paying bills. I applied for a visa to go to Madagascar. Blah, 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 blah. Right? And do all these crazy things. I had to put all these things together. And at the end of the day, my consistency sucks. And so, I've run this podcast for many years now. I mean, it started in 2013 was my first ever podcast that I think I recorded. And it was a video podcast then too. It was using Skype and Skype Zoom call recorder and all the things that went, all the bullshit that went with that, unfortunately. But I was able to do really good things, and I got David Avocado Wolf before he was David Avocado Wolf. I mean, he was getting bigger, but he wasn't, posting all these things.
Yeah, you had some sort of access and contacts, and you just maybe didn't have the time and
I never had the time and resources and energy to keep it consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really difficult.
Yeah.
That's really difficult because I know that if I had done this consistently, I would be much further than I am today.
Yeah.
I think the same is true of YouTube.
Yeah.
I think the same is true of all the projects I've been involved in. But it's because my biggest thing is that I earn a living through being at the leading edge of something. Meaning, the more that I know exactly the strategy of what is working on the leading edge, because that's what marketing is, that's where things work. But the problem is the things that are legacy that would work if I continue doing them over time are harder for me to keep going while also having to invest in the leading edge. And that is really, I don't know, I find that difficult to maintain sometimes.
Yeah, it's because what I kind of see it as is like you're fully capable to do all of these projects individually if that was your project that you had to hold individually, right?
Oh, sure.
It's like if you are a captain of a sailboat, like, yes, obviously you're the most capable person, and obviously you are the most important person because, well, without a captain, the sailboat's probably not going to sail. But also, you kind of need the skippers, right? You need these people to help keep you going in the right direction. You need somebody to do the thing that you can't physically do due to limitations of
there's only so many roles that I can take on the boat.
Exactly.
And I've just been really good at learning all the different roles to the point where it's like, you know, Jordan's going through the process of learning Audition, and he's learning the process of Photoshop, and he'll have a question. He was like, "Oh, how do you do this?" And I'm like, "Boom, boom, ding, ding," and I've always solved the problem. Like I've solved the problem pretty much every time. There was actually one problem that I didn't know how to solve because I don't know what you did. I really don't know what you did. But anyway, there was one problem I didn't know what he had how to solve in like all the problems that he's asked me, and that has been the way that I've chosen to hire and grow, because I realized for me, I said, if I spend my 20s learning all the skills, and then I spend my 30s getting wiser with what I'm going to say, building a better character, because what I would have said when I was 23 is a little less wise than what I'm saying if I'm 31, which is what I am today. And if I spend my 30s building that character and essentially Gary Vee it, by the time I'm 40, this game is over. I know where I'm headed. I know that I'm historically going to be correct, just like Gary Vee is. Not because I'm following him at all. I think I'm on the leading edge with him. I think, and I know this.
But you do take some sort of like inspiration.
I think inspiration, and I'm paying attention to other people.
You're studying.
Of course, it's like if I was an Olympian, I'm gonna look at the other person and what they're doing in their training videos or whatever it is. Of course, I'm gonna follow the journey of other people who are in my market, right? Who are also storytellers and are also running marketing agencies and doing these different things. I don't have the same endowment he does at this stage of the game, so I can't play the game at that level. Yeah. But I can play the game at a much more strategic level with much less resource, but the same amount of character, and I know that that'll break through that noise. And I don't know that because I believe that I'm, you know, carrying some super important, powerful message. I just believe that there's the intersect between my character and then my knowledge, and then the third trifecta piece was my consistency, right? And so that's why I'm looking to Jordan and others to build that consistency in these different categories. And most of this year, 2019, which has been a fairly challenging year for me, I think, has been recalibrating and returning all the stones on all the different projects that I have to do. I'm like, okay, what do I have in motion, and what do I need to finish before I start anything new? I'm going to finish. And I'm not talking about taking on a new client or a new coaching thing or consulting thing for someone or mentorship role. Those are easy. Those are I could do those with my eyes closed because it's my energy and my passion that bleeds through. But what do I have to do to get the podcast up and running? What do I have to do to like really build myself a studio because that's what I want? What do I have to do to like really get the greenhouses up at Valhalla because that's, you know, we bought them 3 years ago and we had to fucking finish getting them up and fully operational for 2020.
Yeah.
And all of those different little pieces had to come together. And it's really inspiring. For me, it's actually really fun to work with you.
Yeah, and I think what, you know, to kind of turn it back onto you, because you were saying like, okay, I know where I'm going to be in 5 years or 10 years from now. I need to get all of these like pieces together, right? Because, you know, the pyramids were built one block at a time, let's say. But, you know, you say that you know that. So, like, you know, everybody's here. We see Superhero Academy. It's bumping. It's growing. It's going crazy. What is the long-term goal? How, like, what can we expect aside from, you know, seeing our faces on different podcasts talking about different topics? How can we see, like, what is, you know, the legacy that we might expect? And, you know, is it Gary Vee based, or is it, you know, are you going to have like
I think Gary Vee
Marc Angelo twist on it?
No, I've always had the premise. So one of the core premises I would say is with an enormous amount of attention, I would always do more than what the people who currently have enormous amounts of attention do. And what I mean by that is, like, I think there's a lot, like, I believe Brad Pitt, for example, can move mountains, but I don't see him really doing that. And I'm not trying to say that there's a dichotomy between, like, being so good at something that you cannot get away from it and you always have to stay at the leading edge. So you cannot use your fame and power and money to essentially go and do something in, let's say, in the nonprofit space. But I don't know that that's true. Like, if I look at Bill Gates, for example, who has a ton of attention and a ton of money, has made massive impact in the philanthropic space. So, to me, my mission is to show that the ROI of return on investment, meaning the entrepreneur in me that I've had in me forever, okay, including the days where I was playing Star Wars Galaxies or selling pins online or doing shit where selling fucking, box set DVDs on eBay and then buying them on Amazon and shipping them directly to people on eBay, right? From all of that stuff that I did with Dad, Cash for Change, all the things. Actually, that's the fourth time I worked with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they don't know where Valhalla started and Superhero Academy all started, as child workers that our father had us going on.
Yeah, I don't think so.
He not child workers,
No.
but he showed us like, hey, if you guys want money, which is like, which we had already understood at that age is like how we buy the toys and the candy. He's like you guys can make money and you can make money doing what you love, and so that's how
you can make money to do touching or in relationship to products or ideas or things that you know or love. And that, to me, when I think about the overall vision of what I'm creating a physical space, a physical school, that is Valhalla. That is a physical place with a community center, and it's a production hub. It's a production facility, in my opinion. And I say production because it's a video production and it's product production. Product, in this case, is farm stuff. But it's also experience production, it's also mentorship production, it's also, in my consideration, story production, because I believe that the challenge that the world is facing today is mainly a narrative war. And so what people would do better if they knew better, but they need to understand how those solutions can actually be embodied. And I'm not saying that I'm the living embodiment of solutions around climate change. I'm far from. Look at where I am at. This is far from if everyone had this, for example, there would be a problem. But I just know that very few people are gonna go to this extreme.
Yeah.
But the real solutions are gonna need to innovate in this particular way. And so how do I bring a megaphone to those solutions? How do I make something like that happen? And how do I disrupt, to the level of Elon Musk level of thinking? So it's systematic disruption. So to me, education has to be free, right? So the only way you make free education is you are able to monetize content. How do you monetize content? You have to do it in volume. You have to have an enormous amount of content. And if you look at the Wall Street Journal or any of these things, they get monetization through memberships, they get monetization through ads, they get monetization through all these different things, like YouTubers, like a PewDiePie who makes content over and over and over and over and over again. Joe Rogan, same thing, over and over and over and over and over again. They make monetization through consistency and volume of content, which is difficult to do. So
yeah, and the best way to bring about change is not to change, a few people who are watching or listening, to change their entire life, but you just want them to change one little small thing, right? And that's how the biggest changes in history have happened, is that okay, we'll change one little thing for everybody, and that's kind of how the new solutions are as well. It's okay, well, maybe one person could be living in the West as this carbon negative person, a vegan, whatever, all of this stuff, but then do they really make a difference? Do they really offset it? Because the bigger change, let's say in that example, would be if we can get everybody to stop, one action, which is, let's say, eating meat or buying goods from China, let's say once per week, every time that they're buying something or every time that they're eating something, if they could change that one action, it's way bigger across society, 330 million Americans, than one person who's the perfect example.
Sure, and I won't die on the mound of any one of those causes, because I think all of those are downwind to changing somebody's belief.
Yeah.
And the only way you change your belief is through story. Meaning, the idea of veganism, the idea of this, the idea of stop consuming, do this, buy from this shop versus that shop, all those things are all formulated from belief.
Yeah.
And if I can make you change from the complacency of this is the way I do it because this is the way I was taught to do it, and this is the way, therefore it's done, to questioning and saying, is this really me? Is this the way I actually want to do it? Or what happens when I flush the toilet? What happens when I do this? What happens if everyone did this? Meaning, if I can instill a small doubt, a small seed of curiosity, that one small seed of curiosity can grow into a massive movement. And so I don't see me having to do any one specific change. My goal is to amplify where change might be, to create the ripple, the small little piece of impact that creates the crack in the fission of your hard head that says, I've changed from being complacent in my way of thinking to being curious.
Yeah.
And curiosity means I don't have the answer. You're not getting the answer from me. I'm not teaching you because I know the answer. I'm teaching you because I have a way of thinking that might get you to your answer. Okay. And that is wisdom, right? Wisdom isn't this is the answer.
So it's not toppling the dominoes and saying I know exactly what's going to happen.
No,
it's toppling the dominoes, but when everything else is kind of in the dark and you don't really know what the true ripple or the true grand.
I have no capacity to understand what the ripple of impact that I have could have on other people. There's way too many factors. There's way too many complexities. Unless I became an AI, I could not know the ripple of impact of all the things that I'm going to create and do. Now, do I want to disrupt? Yes. I want to make education free from the perspective of, to me, Superhero Academy is going to be a free online school. It's actually going to be even better and free. We're going to pay people to learn. For every minute or every second they watch, and that we can prove that they're watching somehow through technology, through using all the things that we're all scared of, like the phones looking at us. Yes, we're going to use those things to know that you're looking at the screen so that you don't just turn it on and start generating money out as a bot. You're in person. We're going to use technology in the force of the world, which is the force of and what is it called? Aikido or whatever, right? Which is rather than stopping the punch, rather than stopping the force, right? We're going to let it move and move with it. Let capitalism destroy capitalism. Let the forces of nature that are already in motion destroy the fabric of their own capacity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that it's funny because, as I haven't necessarily been in like this position of trying to create these big ripples of impact, such as you have been, but I can relate to that because, well, what I've learned from whoever's watching may not know that I've been like a world traveler, and I've learned that my growth and the growth that I've seen amongst everybody and also within society is just exponentially bigger the more that people get out of their comfort zone, right? The more that I've exited my comfort zone, the more that something has been disruptive, to use your word, is that like the disruption maybe is a little bit uncomfortable at first, and then it kind of manifests itself into something else that is like maybe I've gained patience, or maybe I've gained knowledge about this thing that like, oh my God, I was looking at it like wrongly the entire time, and like, oh goodness, like I can't believe that, same as you're saying now, like 23-year-old Jordan would not be saying this same sentence, because, well, I look at 23-year-old Jordan as like, oh my goodness, he was still so far into his comfort zone that like I had no idea that like all of these things were happening, or how to really grow as an individual, as a society may.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity to be had where I see disruption being laid out, but disruption requires massive balls. Like it just requires a courage that is so difficult to find, because everything about business says take the path of least resistance, right? Build, disrupt, find a market, find a niche, and then just make the better mousetrap. Like that's phenomenal business. If I can beat the #1 spot on selling salt and pepper shakers on Amazon, I can be a multimillionaire, and you'll never know my name, and I'll never know my impact. I will have just hacked my way to the top of Amazon, built a business off of that, made millions, and do whatever. That to me is entrepreneurship. Like general run-of-the-mill entrepreneurship, okay?
Yeah.
Most entrepreneurs, you'll never know their name, ever. And that's okay. The guy who runs the corner store, who knows the name? Who owns the grocery store that you buy all your food from? Do you know their name? Like, do you really? You know what I mean? Like, they're a chain. You might know their brand. Maybe it's IGA or Walmart or this or that. I don't care. Or Whole Foods, wherever you're conscious, right? The point is, you don't know the name of the person who's running those things, and you never will. And generally, it's not to say you won't know the name of one specific store. You just won't know the name of most things that you are interacting with.
Yeah.
But everyone knows that Cybertruck came out this last week, right?
Yeah, of course.
Everyone knows. Everyone knows. Everyone's talking about it. Yeah. And that is an art. The Cybertruck coming out, the way it came out, what he did, how he's preparing for Mars, how everything he's doing is preparing for Mars. The boring tunnel. Why would he need to solve traffic in LA? Yes, it's a great problem because he hates traffic in LA. But you know what is even better? Imagine you go to Mars and start digging holes to get resources and then send them back to Earth. Or you go to Mars to dig holes so that you can pressurize the tunnel, because it's so much easier than building a bubble that might burst on Mars with a big sandstorm, right? And then there's no air. So think about what Elon Musk is doing in a much bigger game. Stop thinking about, oh my God, the Cybertruck. It's like, no, he's finding ways to commercialize the metal for the Cybertruck that also is the metal he needs. All of a sudden, it's the same metal, the same type of thing that he needs for the rocket ship to Mars.
Yeah, and right? he also created this cool thing that, like, I thought was the nicest feature of the truck was the fact that it's its own skeleton, right? It's all one solid piece, which is like innovative and maybe got overlooked, I think, in a lot of reviews. But like, as much as he's funding it, that is something also that is going to be very useful on Mars and in his future projects, is creating something not by assembling pieces, but creating this one more util piece.
Something that's simpler and simpler to build on another place. There's 1,001 reasons for why the truck looks that way.
Okay.
And people
have we answered though? Where are the side mirrors?
No, who cares? Nobody cares about that. That doesn't, because I think by the time he's saying that there might be laws that change that we don't need side mirrors.
Okay.
Because there's laws that are going to say that we might be able to do it with cameras. So I don't think we need side mirrors. And if he needs them, you can install them, and that's that. You know what I mean? Long story short, what I'm trying to say is that the type of person that Elon Musk is using your shock and awe short-term mind for his advantage for his long-term gain. And that's just it. He's a phenomenal headline maker. They spend $0.00 on marketing. Wild. That's what they say. They spend all their money on marketing in some ways. They bet it all on stunts. And the stunt of coming out with a car that shocks people, which, guess what? A Ford F-150 owner wasn't going to buy a fucking Tesla truck anyway because they were like, I'm too proud. I'm a Ford F-150 owner. And that's just the mentality. So he played to people who wouldn't have bought trucks, who now will. And that's huge, because I'll consider it. I wasn't in a shop for a truck. The only reason I am is maybe because I have a farm. But otherwise, most people my age, or most people like me, most people who go to a job, don't need a truck. Yet people might buy it because of the innovation, because of the statement, because the culture of millennials, because the culture of like, look at me, blah, blah, blah. He played all into that. But the pipeline that he's building and what he's building for Mars, what he's building for his long-term vision, his long-term game, is brilliant. And everything to do with Tesla, including Solar City, including the innovations in solar panels, solar roofs. Why solar roofs? Because then you could ship them easy. And then you can assemble them back up there, right? Somewhere off this earth, right? The technology that he's building, that he's commercializing now, is just finding ways of creating an economies of scale that take entrepreneurship to another level. Yeah. And I would call that world building level, right? It is so disruptive that it changes industry, like Amazon did, like Walmart did, like fucking Ford did, okay? They're changing the industry fully. And that to me is a level of entrepreneurship that is a level of obsession. And yeah. I am that person.
And we see that, like, it's not something that's completely new to him at all either, right? Like the way that Elon Musk made it to start with was already disrupting the industry. I mean, like
everything he did was
like, I mean, like the internet was pretty much at its advent of popularity when PayPal came out, right? To answer like, how are we gonna transact? How am I gonna trust this guy on this platform called eBay, which is
across borders?
Exactly, across borders, which is no better than answering an ad in a newspaper, except somehow I need to get money, and then who sends first and whatever. So like he was already kind of disrupting that whole new industry, which was the internet, and now he's doing it pretty much with, he's doing it with energy, he's doing it with the automobiles, he's doing it with everything, but with
AI.
a long-term goal, which is,
getting people to Mars.
Getting people to Mars. So
it's noble because he played a long-term game and then he made a bunch of yardsticks to. It's like he's the equivalent of a marathon runner in entrepreneurship, right? Like that's if he was an athlete, he'd be a marathon runner because he's saying, okay, there's these sprints that I have to do. There's certain things that I have to do at certain points. You can even call him a Tour de France type of cycler. But the point is that there's certain things that he had to do at certain moments to bet it all on certain pieces. Now, most of the end game is in sight. He's got most of the pieces, in my opinion, and he will survive. And Tesla is going to go to the moon. And I know that that's controversial, and I know a lot of people are like, no, we're not going to, there's tons of oil on the planet. No, that's not the point of how much oil there is on the planet. That's not the point. The point is that at the end of the day, he's innovating on something that looks like one thing on the surface, but it's something different on the other side. And so that's what Superhero Academy is too. Superhero Academy looks like a coaching funnel, like making an online school, like Mind Valley or Masterclass. No, it's not that. It is significantly more disruptive than that, and it is a way of bringing resources together and a team of people together that I believe are necessary for revolution. This is just a framework for something much bigger, and I can't explain it all here, and I won't explain it all here, because that's why you're going to subscribe to this podcast and like and comment and do all these things, because I'm going to play you for the short-term thinker that you are. And I say that with all the kindness in the world, because you would do the same to me. You do the same to me. Anything you post on social media is hitting the short-term button of me staying connected with you in some way, shape, or form. So if you're watching this, you are part of the short-term game. You went onto a short-term app to get short-term pleasure. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, if you're part of a longer-term game with me, we would be connecting. We would be here in person. We would be building businesses. We would be building plans together. And I do play long-term games with other people, and I'm not trying to use people. I'm not trying to use social media to trick people at all. But it's not to say that I do not see multiple chess moves ahead. The average chess player thinks the next move and maybe one move beyond that. A decent chess player can think 3 or 4 moves ahead. Okay? Decent. Then, that's like 95% of the world. Probably even more. 98% of the world. Then, the next 1%, the 99%, okay, can think anywhere between 4 to 10 moves ahead. And a grandmaster thinks the entire game. They think 15 moves ahead. Okay? I don't care at all to think 1 to 3 moves ahead. Those moves, I understand that they're important to get through, to get somewhere, but I'm playing I'm trying to get to 15 moves ahead. I am not yet 15 moves ahead. I'm not a grandmaster in what I'm doing at all. But this is part of that.
You're basically saying that 2 to 4 moves ahead is still already in like
phenomenal.
The now. It's already like in the short-term future, but you want to start being in that like 8 moves ahead. You want to start being in that 15 moves ahead, because if you're not, then all of these now moves, all of these things that you're doing right now are kind of misguided, because you don't really know what the possibilities are, further out.
So part of what I'm doing with this podcast is catching up to now. I'm saying I need to be so now that I'm able to go live immediately. So I'm more now than most people. Number 1. Tesla truck comes out. If we were watching it live and it was today, right? Today, I could live stream whatever's going on right now. Period. And I could be a few seconds off of whatever you just saw on your TV, which is a few seconds off of actual live reality, right? So maybe we're 7 seconds behind on the TV, and you'll have 7 seconds delay between this and the live, or maybe 14 seconds, depending on how much buffer YouTube or Facebook or whoever is taking. But the point is, I'm 20 seconds away from now. And guess what? The amount of value on now is so powerful in our world today that we are sending satellites to space. Elon Musk doing this too. Satellites to space so that we can make now faster. We've done it with phones. We've done it with food. We've done it with... What is Amazon's innovation? What's Amazon's innovation? Did they make it better than eBay? Not really. The thing that they did better than eBay, faster. It got to you faster. So I didn't have to think as far ahead, and it played upon the person, not the product. The product had to be as good as everyone else, but they said, oh, you know what? We're not going to make product right away. Now they do, because they know what the high margin products are. They know the things that are ordered all the time, and they can bump their product to the top of their feed. Brilliant, amazing. But they focused on the one thing that is the most human of all things. Focusing on what am I going to do tomorrow? Where am I drinking tonight? If you don't know where you're drinking tonight, if you haven't made that decision, you are so fucking far from the frame of mind that I think in that I can't even relate to you. I literally cannot go out because I don't think the way most people think. And I'm not trying to say the way I think is better. In fact, it ruins joy. It ruins joy. I can't go to a bar. No, seriously.
Okay. All right.
I can't go to a bar and just have fun the way that most people just seem to have fun.
Is it because you think that you're stuck in some sort of like observer status, that there's something that you need to like get from it, right?
Yes, I'm an observer.
You're at the bar and
I'm calculating.
You're at it,
I'm an entrepreneur calculating how many people do you think come through this bar? What's their rent? What's the rental rate around this? If I bought this building, how many months would it take for me to I'm literally a psychopath.
Yeah, so let's bring it.
I'm an OCD psychopath.
Let's tie this because I like to tie this loose end that we had at the beginning, which is back to the strategy that we're talking about, right? Yeah. That you were trying to play in the now, and you're talking about Amazon, you're talking about Elon Musk, and how they're playing so many moves ahead, and really what they're doing is playing like any good poker player may, which is play the player and not the game, right? And that's what I saw in you as a strategist, and you were trying to play the people.
I was playing a game too much.
Because the game happens regardless.
I know, but
the dice rolls happen.
I came back from
cards
ayahuasca.
You get dealt anyways and whether it's in poker or in theory of life, or any cards that are dealt are already dealt, even before they're dealt, and essentially the biggest factor is the person, right? And that's why you're saying Amazon made it, is because they played the person, saying like, well, no,
what did the person really want?
This video game comes out or whatever it is. Yes. I need it yesterday.
Yes.
Right?
And they weren't caught up in whether or not because they weren't caught up in the ego of the product. Oh, my product is so much cooler. Mine's supreme. That's product game. Now, they played the player, the way they did marketing, incredible. I will never fault them for the way that they did marketing and the way that certain things came out. I think they're world class. Okay? That's where they played the player in their marketing. The product is garbage. Supreme is no better than the shitty thing that you got from the other store anyway. It's the same fucking thing. If anything, it's worse in some ways. Okay? But the idea of, for me, is my challenge is that I was playing so much of the game, I was learning the game so much in my 20s that I literally lost touch with how to play the player. And I needed to get back to how do I play the player a little bit more? How do I recognize the people in front of me? How do I understand a little bit more of the resources of those things? And then how do I continuously empower them? And luckily, I've always had the backstop of community behind me. I know that the biggest risk in my entire plan is me.
Okay.
I know that the biggest problem in everything that I am creating and doing is actually mitigating the risk of me. It's mitigating the inconsistency of my emotions, the inconsistency of the way I think, the inconsistency of I say that this is my priority, but then I do this other thing because I'm a little ADD in some ways, because I see so much opportunity it's hard for me to ignore, right? And so being super consistent and finding people who can build that consistency is massive. And most of what I've done is always taken the person who was around me and tried to turn them into the player that I wanted them to be. And what was beautiful about this time versus last time working with you, right, is last time I said, I believe you can be this player. Here's the game. And I tried to teach you the game and throw the game at you.
Yeah.
This time I said, what game do you want to play? And he said, I want to tell my stories. And I said, great. I said, let me upgrade your game though, because that's bullshit. Nobody wants to read your book, nor do you. And if you have the problem that you lost your mind and you don't remember stories, the chances are you could read is very low compared to listening to the stories and the emotions and all the things that go with that. I said, why don't you do a podcast? And I just left it there. And I didn't know you were going to do it or not do it.
And I did it.
And you chose to do it. So then I said, okay, well, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it as best as possible. You might as well have the best freaking everything, right? The best quality sound, the best quality whatever. And not to say that I'm a good audio guy at all. I suck at all of these things. But you might as well do it as best as you possibly can. And that's what I want to do. And it goes back to the way that I play games. I'm not playing to beat other people. I don't care what other people... And that's my problem. My problem is I'm so IQ that I forget the EQ. And that was what I realized coming back from ayahuasca, is that this podcast isn't just about IQ. What I create and do isn't just about IQ. It is about the EQ. That is the ripple of impact is measured in EQ.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of somehow where my podcast was already going, is that, well, I was kind of starting it for my own EQ, and I was touching more on other people's EQs by hearing my stories. And like, you know, I always say, like, I've been using this noggin so much, this organ in my head, and I've been ignoring the organ in my chest, that, like, maybe I need to focus on EQ as well. But I think
you've always been more EQ than I am. I think.
Maybe.
And I think part of your strategy is using EQ to, like, okay, I'll give you an example. Jordan and I used to play...
We're going back to games, for sure.
Yeah, of course. Jordan and I used to play games, right? Jordan and I's relationship has always been around playing games, mainly together, okay? But the first game we ever played was Diablo. Or one of the first games we ever got obsessed with. Obviously, Mario Kart, blah, 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 whatever game you could think of. But the first game we ever played fully together, meaning we're both on the same remote, was Diablo, where I would play, because I think I had more dexterity and I had just like more capacity to play.
Let's be honest, you were older.
I was the older kid,
and we had one computer, because that's how it was in 1994.
Yeah, with dial-up internet and all the things. And so Jordan was the potion guy, right? So I would get close to death, he'd press the potion, I'd survive, and then we'd play. But the way that if I died at a boss and then I died again at the boss, Jordan would take the thing, and then he would play until he died. And one of the core strategies that Jordan used for us to get through many of the challenges that we faced as gamers was that he would look to enrage me and be like, you can't beat the boss by playing me, the player, as a, oh yeah? And then I kick it into the next level, the next gear, where I'm like, I'm going to crush this. Because at that moment, it wasn't to beat the game. At that moment, it was to prove to Jordan that I was better than him. But over time, we knew that was true. We knew that was the way, so we used to play it like very consciously. It was a conscious.
You'd be like asking me to enrage you, and then
because I became conscious of my pattern, and Jordan became conscious that over time too that was also working. And so I don't know who came conscious of it first. It didn't matter. But the point is that as you gain in maturity, you gain more consciousness around your own pattern, and then mitigating your own patterns or using your own patterns, right? Back to the force, for yourself. So I know the way that I am, and I know the way that I get to be, and I know where my career is headed, which is I'm an investor. I'm good at seeing talent, superpowers, and then activating them. That's why I called it Superhero Academy, because it is my superhero skill to be Professor X-like, to see things, to overthink them, to think about things, and then the thing I have to mitigate is the emotional piece. I have to get to understanding the emotional piece a little bit more and factoring that in a little bit more so that I understand the players, not just the game, more, and I can really understand how to build a movement that is actually going to hit the hearts and minds of many, many, many people. And I think that's super important for me moving forward, and therefore the risk that I have to mitigate is my inconsistency. And Jordan is significantly more consistent in the way he thinks and plays and does, but he needs support getting to, understanding the thing and understanding the strategy and the different pieces. But put a game in front of Jordan and he will find a way to master it. And I think that's one of your biggest talents. That's one of your biggest talents, and I love playing games with you, because you're one of the only people who can keep up with me. And you're as much as you think that you're less competitive than I am, you're just as competitive as I am. And that's
I never deny it. I'm just less outspoken about it. But
Yes.
but I still kind of play that game with you, which is, you know, to enrage you, to make you beat the boss. I just don't tell you that I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And when we play against each other at the board games, I kind of say, like, I tried the psychological game by, like, planting the seed, like, there's no way Marc can beat me. And then sometimes you just focus on me. And, like, anyways, let's not get back
Jordan
into
plays
it.
psychological games, and he's better at it. I still play the board, and I play probabilities. I'm more of a probability person, whereas Jordan's a probability person, but mixed with more EQ than I have. I probably can calculate IQ stuff faster than he can, but he can calculate EQ things faster than I can, and he plays on the EQ of the other player. Meaning, this player that we're playing with, where we're playing Magic or Catan, he's more my friend than he is Marc's friend, and that's more my advantage. That there's an advantage to those different things in certain moments in certain ways. So, and then it changes, and then the problem is that many of the times I play with my friend, which generally is Germ. The problem is Germ's entire mission is to prove that he's better than me. So it actually fucks up the whole thing, because it's actually I love playing with Germ too, because he wants to prove. He wants to beat me, and part of his strategy is he knows that I'm really good at strategy. So to level the playing field for some of the other players, not Jordan or other people, but more like, you know, average people who don't really care and they're just playing for the sake of playing, and they're there for the EQ of being with their friends and having a beer. Me and Germ are there to win because we're crazy like that. It's hilarious that we play the game. Germ and I have to play the game fully against one another. And knowing that that's the case. And because in life, we actually play together all the time. And I think the same is true with me and my brother. For the most part, we play against one another, but it's so amicable that I don't feel like I have any, you know, when people ask me, oh, how was your relationship with your brother growing up or anything like that, I'm like, oh, it was awesome. For me, it was always great. I don't know if that's the way you perceive it, but for me, it was generally, everything was great.
Yeah, well, I try not to focus on, you know, the childhood bullying that you and our neighbor have done to me, but no,
I didn't bully you as much. And over time, I protected you,
good.
realistically.
And generally, I've always, you know, like if we need to go down there, I would say, yeah, everything was great. You know, I would always say that I had a great relationship with you, and that we never like really like clashed too much. It was, you know, like if anything, I think like we helped each other in different ways, and as Marc would say, you know. My dad took away all of our video games when I was like 10 years old, and it was like, no, you don't try to do that. And I'm the one who found the solution, because, you know, that I was the one who was faced with you know. But
you were more brave in EQ.
Yeah.
You were more brave to defy. You would
like,
defy.
Yeah, I didn't care if I got in trouble.
You were more defiant. You are more defiant still, I believe, than I am. I'm less courageous in EQ than you are. For sure, 100%. I really do. I really do think that that's true. I think you are more. You've got tattoos. You got things that I haven't got. Not because I don't want them, or I don't see as much value in the financial, you know, disbursement of that and certain things. And I can find ways to get them for free anyway. But the point is that I have seen less value in certain things, but it's not why I didn't do it. I don't think. I think it's because I'm less courageous in certain categories of my life. But I'm phenomenally confident and phenomenally courageous in others. And that's just the truth.
Yeah.
How much time are we running here?
We're at almost 54 minutes.
Okay, that's good.
Getting close there, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that we should take away with this before we get to, like, I don't know, closing statements and things is that we're working on a strategy together now. We are playing a similar game. You're playing at a higher level. And I'm maybe a piece on the board, but I still have my strategy and our strategy, at least going forward with, you know, certain podcasts and you know, the guidance that, of course, now I need to learn like 17 programs and how you do things and how everybody else does things and what people want. I need to learn the tools of the trade. And, you know, I have the jack of all trades in front of me, and guiding me with these things is, you know, we're both strategists and we're working on a strategy, which is to deliver some content, to make a lot more out of Superhero Academy on this podcast, to make a lot more out of my podcast so that I can grow as well. My podcast, you know, starting a few weeks ago, got way better in quality. Not that it was horrible to start with, but like, you know, I started baby steps as a podcast would start, and Marc is kind of just like, you know, it's like donkey punch it in the face, and like, let's, like, what are you doing? You're not doing video? Like, let's get like 3 iPhones. Like, how many iPhones? Let's get all of these, you know, pointing at you, and tell the stories that I'm used to telling, because of course, you know, starting my podcast, all I was doing is telling travel stories, and I'm like, hey guys, this is Toast, and blah blah blah, and I'm telling my travel stories as I would tell them in your hostel or at a bar or wherever it is, and then get all the laughs and you know, emotional reactions, you know, that I'm trying to get, especially with the way that I tell it, because like, you know, the way that I tell certain stories, especially, you know, to my top 10, which have not made it on my podcast yet. But those stories, the way that I tell them, it's scripted, right? It's scripted somewhere in here, and it has to do with how I'm doing it, where I'm pausing and things like this, and it's cool.
And that's what you can't do in a book. Well, you can, but you just have to be a phenomenal writer, and that's not your game.
Yeah, I mean,
in my opinion, it's not your strength. Yeah. Your strength is you're a better communicator of emotion through your voice than you are through your written.
Yeah.
From my perspective.
Yeah, occasionally I'll stare at the camera, say something. But this time I won't. And that's the whole thing. It's that I can, you know, I play that, and I've been telling stories for a long time, and it's cool to be working in an environment for me, where you can help guide me with like things like, you know, probably in 10 minutes from now you're gonna be like, oh, you should have done this. Maybe you should stop fiddling with these hands. What are you doing with these things?
No, everything's moving well. I have no particular feedback at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, final thoughts, let's say, to close this up, as we're nearing the, you know, 1 hour mark. 1 hour mark.
Yeah, so I think this is the better way of going about it, which is, so what's your fear in working with me, and what's my fear in working with you? And do you want me to start, or do you want to start? Meaning, so my goal right now is to mitigate the risk that you have towards me and I have towards you. And I think that's like honest, raw, awesome, and a much better way than being like, hey, click on my link and do the thing. If you want to see my brother's podcast, links in the description.
Yeah.
If you put it there.
Yeah. Hopefully. If it's not there.
If it's like not there.
That first comment.
You know who to blame.
This guy. I'll go first. Let's start. I think, like, you know, my biggest fear is the fact that like we never work together on something that I believe to be like more in your like line of work than in mine. So like I have the initial discomfort, let's say, of like moving away for the first time, or like okay, here's like the new culture, I need to adjust. Like, what is this like thing that you're eating? Like, I mean, this is water, but like, what is all this content? What is this screen behind me, and how do I work this thing? So like, I have a fear of like, can I get used to the culture of working with you at like, you know, your pace is fine. I think I can like adjust myself to the pace, but it's like, it's the initial like expectation versus reality, where it's like, can I meet that expectation? And it's like, and if I do, like, am I gonna get any sort of like recognition, or is it just gonna be like, okay, good, like he did it, and I'm only gonna get recognition for like faults, which is kind of what I'm expecting. It's like, it's not gonna be like, good job, you did this, but it's gonna be like, okay, you did it.
See, that's me playing the player.
And then if I don't do it, then it's like, what the hell?
Yes.
You didn't do it.
Because we grew up in an environment that's mainly negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement.
Okay, and so what's your biggest fear working with me?
My biggest fear is just the risk of your flight, right? You're a fight or flight kind of person. So you're the type of person that might get here, feel like blah, blah, get bored because you get comfortable. And then once you get comfortable, then you're not uncomfortable enough that you want to run to somewhere to be uncomfortable. So my balance playing the player is having you be comfortable enough that you want to continue working in this culture, and particularly in the culture of a faster pace, which there's some risk there, there's some like thought that I have there, but that's okay. I generally think like, I don't think the pacing of this needs to be too complicated, particularly if I stack functions. Meaning if I'm able to say like, hey, you're filming this podcast, but then there's another one right after and another one. And if I can stack certain things so that you just need to like have some bursts of powerful moments to get certain things done, I think you're going to find efficiency within all of that, and it's going to be great. But the other half of that equation is keeping you uncomfortable enough that you also feel like you are continuously growing and that somehow you're not missing out on something else that's going on in the world. I think that's playing the player, not the game. The game is, can you figure out Audition? Can you figure out what the preamp does and what this does and how this does? Can you figure it out better than I can? Right? Can you figure, like, I haven't figured out how to deal with one of the loop problems on this.
Okay.
Right? Can you figure it out better than I can? Can you, like, we're doing it with iPhones. You mentioned iPhones. Can you make sure that, can we do the DSLR test? Because I just haven't taken the time to, like, fully plug it in and put all the batteries and do the thing. Yeah. And part of that is money related. Part of that is like, okay, fucking let me just go with the devil that I know because it's easier for me to move. Because I'm a fucking insane when it comes to pacing. But if we can mitigate those, if you can keep up with the pace, if I can stack functions, and if you can be just comfortable enough that you're excited about it and you're seeing the validation, but also uncomfortable enough that you're not bored with it, and that you're really seeing a personal gain from it versus I'm just doing this for Marc, or this is a good way for me to make money now until I go somewhere else, then that is big.
Okay.
And I think the commitment of those things, because I'm also betting on, because for me, the highest cost is the upswing part. It's me risking my reputation saying, okay, Jordan's going to get this done. And then I'm like, okay. And the reality is I know how to get it done anyway. But the problem, where that would ruin me is that it would stunt. It would have to.
You get the wheels in motion and somebody slams the brakes.
On me. Not on their stuff. I'll get their stuff out on time anyway, or roughly on time. It will slow my own podcast.
Yeah.
And it's now, in my 30s, my time.
Yeah.
It's not my time to do the marketing thing of the other company. I will do it anyway in some ways. I will play advisor and I'll be an investor because that's what I am meant to do. That's what people should hire me to do more than anything. Yeah. Right? And help them build a team that then I walk away from slowly. Like, those are the things that they should hire me to do actually.
Okay.
And I'm promising some people production because I believe that I believe that if given a challenge, you meet the challenge, versus if you're given too loose of constructs, you actually don't play well. You play better when the game is more defined. And I'm bad sometimes at making definition of the micro details of the game.
Yeah.
I'm actually better. I'm actually much better macro than I am at details.
I need to know the rules of the game and see where the exploits are. So if you guys are seeing this on YouTube, that's a pretty good sign.
If it's made it there, it's because he's doing his job. With that said, there's going to be lots more podcasts coming down the pipe. And what order is this going to come out in? Yeah, the next podcast will be a podcast with a good friend who is a maestro, who is going to be here in like a few minutes. Yeah. So we're going to get it going, and we'll see you in the next episode. You know where the links are. You know where things are. You know what. If you made it all the way here, you should hit that thumbs up button, or the likes, or the comments, or blah, 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 or all that share. You know why you should do all those things. Because if you got here, you found value in it. And all I ask, as a passive viewer of this podcast, is to share that value by the little slacktivism actions that you can do, which is click that thing, because that is valuable to me. It's not the only thing you're valuable to me, but if I don't know you, if you don't reach out to me, if you don't comment, then I can't know you. So the way that you can let me know who you are is by clicking those links and clicking those share buttons in the comments, particularly the comments, because then I know who you are. And I really do pay attention. As macro as I am, I pay attention to all the inputs all the time, because for me to make macro plans, I have to know how things are going on in the micro, and that's without micromanaging. I'm pretty good at not micromanaging. I'm better at that, I think.
Okay.
But anyway.
Subscribe, like, ring the bell.
All the things.